Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Barsek. I'm the exhibitions director and curator at the Duluth Art Institute. And tonight we're meeting with one of our artists that is on view in our Steffel Gallery. This is Blair Treuer, and she'll be talking to us tonight all about her exhibition and her future endeavors. Hi, Blair.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thank you. So I wanted to start by talking about how you got involved in working with fiber, because from what I understand, you started as a painter.
Well, I'm not sure that I would even say that I started as a painter. I have always been a creative person and, explored various artistic endeavors, but only on the level that most people do, having taken some art classes in elementary school, middle school, high school, like I think everybody's kind of dabbled in some sort of artistic form at some point in their life. So I had only taken a couple classes before, but I've always been drawn to painting, to looking at the different techniques of painters. And, I was always the kind of person who, when I went to a gallery, I would stand this close to somebody's painting because I wanted to see, the brush strokes and the details. And so I've always been interested in art, but I never really formally pursued any sort of artistic endeavor until now. And so, it's kind of a crazy story how I got into fabric. My children are all Native American, and they participated in a traditional Native ceremony where part of the requirement for me was to make a bundle full of blankets as part of their offering for this, to participate in this ceremony. And, I'm non-Native. And so the only ways that I could contribute to this huge piece of their spiritual life was to help make their bundles. So these blankets and food. So I just poured everything I had into those blankets. And I had never sewn before. So I had to teach myself how you even make a blanket. I had no idea. But I have always been a creative person. So, even from the very beginning, when I first started making these blankets for each of my kids' ceremonies, I never did just traditional squares like patchwork quilt. I wanted to pictorially convey their Native American names that they were given when they were born in each of their blankets. And so through that process, I taught myself more about sewing, and about fabric and what I was doing. And as I was on that journey, each of my pieces that I made, each of my blankets, just got more detailed, and I took it further, and I challenged myself, and I just really dove deep into that whole experience. And honestly, when I was done, when my youngest kid was done and her bundle was off and everything was over, I didn't know if I would ever sew again. Because it was so stressful and it was so much work, and I didn't know if I was just really into it because of the spiritual gift that it was and how much my kids mean to me. And that's where that love affair came from. So I didn't know, I didn't know if I would ever do it again. But it didn't take long for me to realize how much I loved the process and how much more I wanted to explore in what it means to work with fabric and what I could even create, because I had no idea what was possible because I never tried before. So then I gave myself some permission to just explore this without any sense of direction or what I wanted from the experience, but I just wanted to play with fabric and see what I could do. And then I ended up creating this collection, which is now at the Duluth Art Institute. So, yeah.
Well, and before we go any further, I should mention that this interview is being recorded, and anyone that's chatting in with questions, it is being recorded and will be on PBS Slice, so everyone's aware. And looking at your exhibition and knowing that you've had this love affair with painting, you can really see how you're mixing your colors with your fabrics. And I am curious, where are you getting your fabrics? Is it something that you've collected over years? Do you specifically go and look for particular patterns or colors? What is that part of the process for you?
Yeah, that is like a treasure hunt for me, because I use tiny pieces. I mean, like this is about the size of the pieces that I generally use, and often, especially if I'm trying to depict somebody's face, or something really detailed, I go even smaller with the pieces that I use. And I'm really drawn to batiks, because when you unfold a piece of batik fabric, there's so many nuances in visually what you see. And so those are a lot easier for me to find, like what kind of defining features I would need to make it look like a nostril or something, So that's definitely a scavenger hunt. But I also find I work so hard and so much that I don't waste a lot of time. So I just go to my local fabric store. I usually don't, make the time to go to any place bigger than that. So I go to Joanne Fabrics in Bemidji, and their fabric selection is really small. But I'm always inspired. Even though it's a super small selection to choose from, I usually walk through the aisles and pieces just like get me really excited. And often I have no idea what I'm going to use that fabric for, or that color, or, but something about it just is really, really calling to me that it needs to be part of my palette, so to speak. But picking out fabric is also really challenging because, if you're a painter, you can just, how to make the color that you need. And if it's not right, you know how to tweak it to make it what you want. But with the fabric, I mean, in the fabric store, you're under fluorescent lighting. So then you get it home and everything just looks totally different than what you thought. So it is really a scavenger hunt trying to find the right palette to use for pieces. But I think that's also pretty exciting too.
Well, I think that is one of the most exciting parts of your work, is that you get so much dimension through using all sorts of different fabrics. And yet, when you look at the entire collection, you can see certain fabrics being tied in other pieces. Yeah. And one thing I did want to talk about tonight was some of those consistencies. And I would say the most prominent piece would be the inclusion of goldfinches in your work. And I can't remember, to be honest, if that bird is present in your piece of yourself.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. So the goldfinches were constant throughout this collection. And the goldfinch in Ojibwe culture represents the language. And for me, with all of these pieces, I've had them represent not just Ojibwe language, but everything that it means to. I have it represent everything that I've learned about traditional Ojibwe culture. and the gifts that it gives. So, what I've learned that I didn't know before I came into this family is traditional Ojibwe clothing, their food, their language, their music, all of those have layers and layers of meaning. And all of those meanings tell the Ojibwe people, like explain to them how to live your life, how to connect to the earth, and how to connect to each other. So it's not just, this is, and the language does that too. It has layers of meaning in each word that explains a way of life and a way of being, where you come from and where you're going. And so the goldfinches kind of represent that whole toolbox in each of the portraits. And they play out in different ways in each portrait with each person, depending on their life experiences or how I see them as their mom, and what I think those tools, how I think they use those tools in their life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely want to come back to that. But first, I'd like to talk more specifically about your self-portrait and what meaning that piece has to you, and what learnings came out through that process of creation.
Yeah. So my self-portrait was the first one I ever made. And, it was really hard. It was a really hard piece for me. I ripped it up about 4 or 5 times and started over. It had me question whether or not I should even do this, because I had this image in my mind, and I don't know why. I don't know where it came from. I didn't know what it meant, but it just like nagged at me for years, this image of myself. And so I knew when I wanted to do portraits that was the first that came to mind, that I had to try to explore or try to figure out how to make it. And it was super challenging. And, I definitely went through that process of, I'm trying to look at myself. And I became very critical and self-conscious. And I think that's why the struggle was so hard making that portrait, because I think it can be really hard to look at yourself and be vulnerable with yourself, and explain yourself. So once I finally created it, then I realized that I should definitely be doing this. I should definitely move forward with this project. That I had so much more to learn, and I could sense that I was on a journey. But it wasn't until after I finished that portrait that I realized what it meant to me, and the realization of what it meant came over in waves. Like, I would get pieces here and there of how this explained my life. And I would like to read my statement about it so that I don't get way off track. I have it here. Just one second. All right. My self-portrait is about the cocktail of both despair and hope that I feel as a mother and wife in this family, and about my purpose in this world. I'm in the dark and naked. I often feel I have nothing to offer my children or my husband. I am of Scandinavian descent, but I don't even know what that means to me. I don't have ways of being handed down and taught with purpose. I don't have things that are known by my people and through my people from ancient times. I don't have spiritual gifts, birthrights to bestow, etc. No toolbox. I'm just out here winging it, loaded up on American culture, gas stations, shopping malls, McDonald's. I didn't realize how little I had until realizing my husband had so much. I didn't know how lost I felt until I became aware of how sure-footed my husband and my children are. But I have hope. The antlers are on top of my head as if to say, there is something incredible about me too. I also possess a spectacular gift. I can't see it, but I can feel it, as though it's within my very bones, passed down from my ancient tribe too. And someday I'll know how to use it and be empowered by it. And for me, that feeling, that piece is like the central thesis of that body of work. It informs the rest of it. And I hope it explains the beauty and wonder too that I feel as an outsider in this culture, looking in and celebrating what that has meant for my children in each of their portraits. Yeah.
That's exactly what was going through my mind as you were reading your statement in terms of questioning what gifts you have to offer. I think this show really exemplifies that gift because each piece is so beautifully wonderful in that your love for each person in your family comes through in the work. And I like to think of it as that's part of your gift is showing your family and showing the world how much each of them mean and honoring them as individuals, while at the same time honoring your entire family and their culture. So thank you for sharing this work. And earlier, before we were recording, we were talking about how your children feel about being depicted so personally in this work. And you shared that, you certainly talked with your children, before you shared exactly the words that express what you're putting forth. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah. So initially, each of my children got on board with me depicting them in my art through the image. Like they were all fine with me doing a portrait of each of them to eventually show to people. And then after the pieces were created, like each time after I would create one of the portraits of my children, the meaning that I found in that piece always was always so vulnerable and so intimate and personal. And so I did make a point of sharing what I thought the piece meant to me with my children before sharing it with anybody else. Because I wanted to protect them. Some of them are shy like myself. So I didn't want to overexpose any vulnerabilities that they may have or just things that they might be uncomfortable sharing. But everybody was so supportive of how I saw them as their mom and what I wanted to share with everyone else. So, yeah.
And how about your husband? Because he's included in this collection as well.
Yeah. He has been so supportive of me. And in fact, none of this could have happened without him standing by me, allowing me the space and time to pursue this. And it couldn't have happened without him also being willing to let people see into our world through my eyes, very personally. And so, I was a little bit nervous sharing with him where this journey had taken me and what I wanted, what I wanted to not portray, but how wide I wanted to open the door, right, into our personal lives. And I think yes, he's been 100% supportive, but I'm sure he had his moments like I did of, this isn't like it ended up not being like a fluff exhibit, like, I kind of went deep. And when he read my words, I think he felt something and felt comfortable allowing me to share that. And then when he saw people react, and I think that was for my kids too, and for myself, like when the response to my work has been, I'm going to try not to cry right now, but that has been an unexpected, extraordinary gift for me personally, and I think for my family as a whole. So thank you, everyone who's engaged with my work.
Well, I think it's so authentic, and it's coming from a place of deep love. And some of the pieces, when you look at them, it feels like you had to have a plan, like you had to be intentional. And I think about Tony, your husband's piece, and how it's so circular.
Yeah.
And it has so much movement. And I know you and I have talked about that before, in that it was unintentional and the meaning revealed itself to you. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, again, so that I don't distract myself, I would like to read the statement that I have for that piece. I get nervous, so then I don't get very articulate, so I prefer to just read this. Okay. This portrait is about my husband's life work as an educator and an activist, preserving his language and culture for generations to come. The goldfinches are flying out of his mouth as he bestows these gifts to our son. This portrait took about 5 full days just to sew it. When I'd finished and had laid it flat on my kitchen table to admire it, I quickly realized that it would not lay flat. It had ripples that created circles in the center of the portrait. At the time, I'd intended to stretch my portraits over a frame like a canvas, but this one would not lay flat. I cried, not knowing enough about sewing to know what I'd done wrong or how in the world I was going to fix it. I felt completely incompetent. I walked away from it in a panic, hopeful that if I just took some time to breathe, that I'd figure it out. I went to bed, couldn't sleep, came back out in the middle of the night and spread it out in front of me again. I'd always felt like these portraits weren't mine, that I was just the vessel from which they came. Then suddenly, when I looked at this piece and the unintended circular movement that had shown up unexpectedly, they looked like ripples in a pond. That is exactly the nature of my husband's life's work, to effect change, one small movement that steadily grows and expands exponentially over time. I didn't know how it got there, but it absolutely belonged there. A sacred symbol for many cultures, the circle, an ancient and universal symbol for wholeness and unity.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. And that was one of my favorite parts of that piece, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you think about the other pieces in this collection, were there surprises that came up through technique or at the end?
Yeah.
Were there other pieces that immediately come to your mind?
Luella was a giant surprise for me, and it changed the way I approached my work. So my portrait of my daughter Luella, first of all, it was the easiest portrait for me to do. I don't know, it just, like, my body just moved and it just revealed itself really quickly. But as I was moving along, it felt like it wanted to explode and stay that way. And I was really struggling with that because it just did not want to be boxed in, no matter what I did. Like, it just felt wrong to box it in. And if you met my child, you would know that she cannot be boxed in. So it's very fitting. But yeah, it wanted to explode. And so, you know, she's this image of her. I know we can't see it right now, but this image of her hair is like flying back up into the air and she's laughing and the goldfinches are like rushing past her. And I decided that because it needed to explode, I need to figure out how to leave it like that. How do I let her explode? And so I started mounting my pieces to wire. And that changed the nature of what I was doing, because now I could free form these pieces. They did not have to, you know, be a square or a rectangle. I could take them wherever I wanted them to go. And not only could they be irregular shaped, but they could almost be sculptural on the wall. And that was really, really exciting for me. And I know, you know, I've said this before to people that when I first mentioned that I wanted to do that I wanted to mount them to wire, you know, I had a very small circle that knew that I was doing anything like this. So I had mentioned it to a few people and I got a lot of, oh, really? Okay. You know, like very skeptical that would work or that was the right approach. So I took a gamble on an instinct that I had, and I'm so grateful that I allowed myself to think outside the box, so to speak, and let her portrait do that.
Well, her portrait is so joyous. There's just so much happiness in that piece. And through that experience, you can see a shift within the collection of going from, like you said, from that box to more free form. And I think one of the most extreme examples of that is the Prayer for Jordan piece.
Yeah.
And that one is the least distinct in terms of, a face, a traditional portrait as people would imagine. And it's certainly not a by any means.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more detail about that piece?
Yeah. That one was, aside from my self-portrait, that portrait was the hardest for me to make. I wanted to depict each of my 9 children. And this particular child was just going through so much trauma. And so I wanted to find a way to be true to her and true to her story. But it was hard to let myself dive into so much pain to be able to get there with this piece. Again, I would like to just start with my statement that I had made about it, and then I can go deeper. Because this one can be a little difficult for me to talk about, so I'm going to stick to my script for just a second. Jordan is my oldest child. She has struggled with drug addiction for a decade, has been in and out of treatment, in and out of jail, and has lost her children, who are featured in the portrait of my son Robert, who dropped out of college to raise them when they were removed from my daughter's care. This portrait is a prayer that those cultural and spiritual ways of being may overcome her vision by blocking her access to the destructive influences she has become fixated on. The cultural toolbox, as I like to call it, is a birthright, but it was also gifted to her. And it feels as though she has neglected to open the box for some time now. The wire mesh that I mounted my pieces on are visible in parts of this portrait, representing the cage, both literally and figuratively, that she keeps not only her heritage in, but the cage her body and spirit are in as well, having been placed behind bars several times. I encourage all of you to be prayerful as you interact with those 2 particular pieces. As uncomfortable as it is for me to publicly share her private struggles, I know that she can't do this all alone. I believe that the more we see each other, actually see each other, the more love and support we can generate from each other. I also believe in the power of prayerful thoughts, and it is my hope that by sharing this, she will have the full weight and breadth of this community rallying behind her, because prayers are incredibly powerful. In this piece, it's hard to see her. It's hard to even tell it's a portrait at first glance. And there's lots of reasons for that. The first being, when somebody goes down the deep, dark tunnel of addiction, it is hard to see them. It's hard to see, it's hard to see what they're not showing you. it's hard to see them even just literally like connecting, trying to connect, trying to be a part of each other's lives in a meaningful way, in a clear way, is really challenging. And you know, a friend had sent me a message after viewing this piece in person, and she said it very clearly. She said, not many people know this, but you know, my sister had to be committed from her because of her abuse of drugs, and her mother also had mental health issues. And she said, we were sitting there at the hospital committing my sister, and my mom, who has trouble articulating what she's thinking and feeling because of her own issues, turns to me and she says, this is how I see her. She looks like this to me, talking about her daughter who feels lost to drug abuse. And so this friend said, when she came face to face with my portrait, it was just like a gut punch, because that is how it feels as a mom. Like, she's in there. You can see her. If you look closely, you can see she's in that portrait. She's still there. Like, this much of her, you know? But that's how it feels to love somebody who's struggling with addiction. And then the other pieces of why you can't really see her that well is, even though in every bout of sobriety she's had, she has said she wants to share her story, especially with the rest of the kids in this house, so that they learn from it. You know, she's expressed that the worst thing that can come from all of this is that there are no lessons learned for anyone. And so even though she is very public about the struggles she's faced in her life, as a mom, I still felt super protective of her. So her image is skewed. Even just the dimensions of her face that you can see, they're slightly off. It's not a literal depiction of what she looks like. And you know, the goldfinches are flying in her face, because even though I do think we need to talk about these things as a community and humanize them. And it was important for me to share what this has been like through the eyes of a mom. I still needed to protect my kid. And so, you know, people that know my family well know who she is, but her image and her stories out there, but her image connected with it is failed.
Wow. Well, I think that's one of the most powerful things about, I guess, art in general, is that we can really express emotions without words. And people can respond so well to visual prompts. And your work just hits very close to heart for a lot of people. And I know that one of your newer pieces, you're diving deep as well. And I don't know if that was your original intention with your next portrait. But thinking about your next series, can you talk about this piece that you've recently put out on social media?
Yeah. So I generally, how I work is it's not intellectual. Okay. So I'm not like, what do I want to say? And now how do I want to depict that? Like, it goes backwards for me. I'm like, I get these images in my head, like dreams, like having a dream, and I just can't let go of it. And I feel like it's almost like reading the tea leaves or something. Like, I have to make it so then I can understand what is being communicated to me through this. So that's how I've approached every piece I've ever made so far. And then there is a gallery from Spain that contacted me and said, we want to invite you to the International Contemporary Art Fair in Paris, France, and we want to represent you. Can you do this? We found out that none of my pieces can travel at that time. So in order for me to participate, I would have to create new work. And at first I was like, I can't do that. I'm already like, I've already started my second collection. I've deep dove into something else. I can't stop what I'm doing and do this. I don't have inspiration. I don't want to just make something to make something. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I was actually meditating on that in my drive back from Duluth to Bemidji. and I was thinking about, okay, I want to say yes to this opportunity. So what could I practice? What could I practice with fabric just so I can be involved? And I was thinking about the art that I love and what I love to make. And I love the female figure. I'm drawn to art that discusses the female figure. I mean, when I scroll through Instagram, if it's a nude, I always stop. Like, I'm just in love with the human body. And so I thought, I wonder if I could do, if I could talk about my love affair with the female body in 3 portraits. And the first portrait that came to mind is the one that I just shared on social media. I'm doing 3 portraits. One is a self-portrait, one is of my 9-year-old daughter, and one is of my mother. She said yes. So super excited about that. So I was thinking about, my 9-year-old daughter's body. And immediately, the image that I made, the portrait that I made, hit me. And I decided to also share that portrait as a video, because that's how it played out in my mind when I saw it unfold. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I did a video of my process making this portrait. And so I created an image of my 9-year-old daughter, and with a story that goes along with it. And as you're watching the video, her body just gets surrounded by darkness. Because when I think of the future of my child's body as her mom, that's what I see. I see how prevalent sexual abuse is. I have been very aware, because I'm in this family, of the silent epidemic that is missing and murdered Indigenous women in the United States and Canada. And I feel like, and then also kind of where we are right now with our president, a world leader, bragging about grabbing women by the pussy. I don't know can I say that? But
You did.
So I feel like I'm not sure I'm seeing progress being made on this issue yet. And now I don't know where we go from here, because this feels like a backslide in this conversation about how we treat each other, and the compassion that we need to bring to the forefront of our interactions with each other. And so this piece, I feel like it's not just despair that I'm portraying. I'm celebrating the beauty and wonder of my 9-year-old little body, and what she can do. Like she can do the splits 4 ways. I mean, like she's super strong, and just the delight that she feels in her body right now, and the delight I have as a parent watching her use it. And I want to have that same hope and excitement for her when I think about the future of her body too. And I didn't realize when I wanted to depict her until I started the process, how important this conversation is to me. And that I need people to start talking about it. And the only disheartening thing about having shared that piece on social media is 99% of the people who are engaging with it are women. But it's not a women's issue, right? It's why is this so prevalent in male culture to devalue and dehumanize women? And, I talk about sex trafficking in the video, and I feel like that's something that's not on people's radar. And I don't know why we're not talking about it, because it's happening here in our area. I mean, I used to hear about Duluth, actually, specifically, that especially Indigenous women are disappearing from Duluth and being pulled into sex trafficking, or being rescued and brought back to Duluth. And yeah, I need our community to lean into this conversation.
Well, and I think your piece absolutely does that. And when you talk about her being surrounded in darkness, what was coming to my mind was that the strength and confidence of herself comes through as well. And that piece is so strong, using the message of, we're going to have to do this. And it might feel like we're alone in fighting for this, because when you say 99% of the people engaging with that piece are women, to me that says, in a way, we're doing it alone, because we as women can't do it without the support of men who are engaging in those practices.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful piece, and I hope everyone gets a chance to see your video of it.
And another part of that piece that I guess I really just want to hit home, and I don't have all the answers. I'm raising the questions. I'm bringing the conversation to the table, but that doesn't mean that I have any answers. But I wanted to explain to or point out that the reason this happens is because somebody's child carries out these acts against other people, right? So I feel like too often the conversations are to our daughters about how to protect yourself instead of including our sons in those conversations about what these young girls are experiencing when they go out there in the world, and how you show kindness and compassion within loving relationships, within sexual relationships, whether they're loving or not, I guess, but like how important that mutual respect should be in any interaction with another person. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those words. And thank you for sharing all of your work at the Duluth Art Institute. We've been so thrilled to have you there, and I'm really excited to be able to host your work during this time when a lot of doors are being shut. I'm wondering, Alyssa's listening in. Do we have any questions? Okay. All right.
Hi, everybody. Blair, I'm interested to learn how you taught yourself these construction techniques, because you said that you were very much self-taught and you went from like ground zero, not knowing how to build these quilts. Like, what was your process to learn this?
So I started off, the first couple blankets that I had made, I used squares, but I still created a picture with squares. So it wasn't just a patchwork quilt. I still had something to say, but I started off kind of using squares to do it. And then, with the next child, I challenged myself with other techniques. So in my one daughter's blanket, it was so hard to make. I had these women standing there with star quilts on, so you can see the star coming out the back of the quilt. And so I actually taught myself how to do a star quilt to make that part and then insert it into my blanket. And I was like trying to actually quilt, these circles for rain that had dropped, and all of that was so hard. And I realized I hate that stuff. Like, if I have to measure, measuring, doing the math, lining things up, ironing before you use things, that killed the joy for me. It was way too stressful. And so I don't know if other people do what I do. I have no idea. But I just decided that I wanted to, it felt more natural to me to approach it like a painting instead. So now I just lay a blank canvas basically, and I put down pieces like it was paint and move forward that way. So I tack down my tiny pieces with a little touch of adhesive. I just use a little bit so that if I change my mind, I can move it. But it just holds it down enough until I get it under my sewing machine. And then I just sew it all together so that it stays that way. And like I said, I am not a quilter. I honestly don't know hardly anything about quilting. I consider master quilters to be people who have mastered lots of sewing techniques, and I don't know anything about sewing. So I don't know if I'm doing something that other people do or not. This is just the approach that comes most natural to me. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I'm so excited to watch where you're going next, because to me, it's practically unbelievable that these 11 pieces that we have on view right now are your first foray into these techniques. And I'm just so excited to see what happens next.
Oh, thank you. You know, I feel the same way. I feel like I just started. I feel like I just this is like I'm at the infancy stage of my career. I have no idea what I'm even capable of because I haven't been in this for very long. So I am too excited to see, like, the further I go, how my skills sharpen, or, you know, what direction it takes, or what inspires me as all of these unfold. And like I said, I don't even know what I'm capable of, but I am so grateful and so thrilled to be able to find out.
Well, your work is going to be on view through the end of the year, and people can come visit the Duluth Art Institute, open from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day, Tuesday through Sunday. So we're closed on Monday, and we're housed in the St. Louis County Depot. So please come visit us, see Blair's work, see the other shows we have on view as well. And we really look forward to seeing where you go next.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It means so much to me to have my work on view in Duluth, and especially with you guys. You've been so warm and welcoming and encouraging, and I'm so grateful that we've made this connection and that I get to be affiliated with you guys right now.
Well, we're very grateful as well. Go for it.
Yeah.
So they can hear me. We have somebody who wants to know, for your images, do you totally just freehand them, or do you kind of have a reference image that you transfer onto the fabric ahead of time, or are you just building this freehand?
I started freehanding, and then all of these pieces started taking me a long time because I would second guess myself too much. So now I usually take an image. I use a photograph that I look at while I'm creating the image. Yeah. No, I don't sketch. Yeah, I don't sketch or anything. And honestly, I think the reason I don't do that, I don't know, it doesn't come naturally to me, but also I don't want to waste any time. Like you know, people have asked me if I do a charcoal sketch first so that I kind of know what I want to do or anything like that. And I don't want to waste any time getting started. So I just start. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's such an inspiration to see an artist give themselves permission to just create and not necessarily have a set of rules that you're trying to follow. Instead, you're following your instincts and your heart, and the work is beautiful. So thank you for the inspiration.
Thank you so much.